Hi everyone, Jessica here and welcome back to my channel. So today's video we're going to be taking a little bit of inspiration again from this month's issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft, and that's issue 207. And we're going to be looking at creating a block background. So you can see the type of card that they've got in here. We're pretty much going to be copying this card because I have got a particular stamp that I want to use. But you can see it's got some instructions on how to mask to be able to create a background like this. But I'm just going to kind of see where we go with it, going to blend some Distress Oxide inks together and see where we go. So today's card is going to be a slimline card, and this is actually the first one that I've ever made, and I think the card is 8.5 by 3.5 inch. So you can see here I'm just using this low tack purple tape, and I'm just using this to mask off my first section. So this is a perfect tape, low tack, because you don't want it to rip up your cardstock, or when we do lay it over the ink that we blend, we don't want to damage that in any way. So this is the perfect tape. So the first colours that I'm going to be blending together, you can see here we've got spun sugar and picked raspberry. So I'm just going to take my blending brush, I'm going to start with that spun sugar, and then we're going to just do some really simple blending into that picked raspberry colour. So I want to get as good a blend between these two colours as possible, but I know that I'm going to be white heat embossing over the top of this with quite a large image, so I'm not sort of too worried about getting it perfectly. So once you're happy with then your blending for that section, then you can go ahead and start on the next one. So I am going to be using this tape multiple times, and the one thing I do want to do is just to clean it off slightly so I don't sort of bring any of that colour that's on that purple tape onto my next section. I already love this first section, but let's move on to the next. So what I'm going to do is lay this purple tape back down again, and I'm going to very slightly have a little bit of pink showing. That way I won't get any white sections in between my blocks of colours. I want them to very slightly overlap. So you can see we've got our next section ready. And now we're going to be blending together squeezed lemonade and fossilized amber. So again, doing the exact same thing, we're going to be blending from one into the other. The one thing I am doing is altering which end I start with the lighter colour. I want it to look different, I don't want it to be too uniform, but blending like this is just super easy. And what I love the most is now that I've got quite a few of these Distress Oxide colours, I find that I can blend a lot more, I can create a lot more because I have a bigger variety of colours, which does definitely help. If you perhaps don't have as many colours to blend together, then you could be doing this, each block is just a single colour and not blending them at all. Obviously you use the products that you've got. This is obviously just what I'm creating using the products that I have. So that's our yellow section done, and you can see how lovely that matches up with that pink area as well. Just by overlapping it very slightly, it's given us a really sort of a flawless divide between those two colours. So now we're going to move our low tack purple tape and do the same again on this yellow section to cover that area up. I do need an additional piece here as well, just to cover up that little bit of pink. In terms of the size of the pattern that I'm following for the blocks, I'm really not worrying about it. I'm just kind of going with whatever size I want, to be honest with you. So my next colours I'll be using is, we've got cracked pistachio and peacock feathers. So these two blend so perfectly together. This is probably one of my favourite colour combinations. And it actually looks really, really nice next to this squeezed lemonade and the fossilised amber as well. I think it looks lovely. So again, we're starting with that cracked pistachio at the top of the card and then going into that peacock's feather near the bottom. Like I said, again, just sort of varying the way that I'm blending. Because this isn't a very big card, it comes together really quickly, so blending these colours together, again, it takes no time at all. It just depends how well of a blend that you want. So now I've got that section finished. Again, I'm going to take off my purple tape, and you can see I'm just wiping that tape off as well, just so I don't mix any of that colour that's on the purple tape onto the section I'm working on. So I really love those three colours together. I think that's going to be perfect. I think I need to keep that in mind for any future cards. So now on to the next section. So again, just using the purple tape. You might find that the tape becomes less sticky. So after I do this particular section that I'm going to be doing now, the tape does lift up slightly and does kind of go into the next section. So if you find that your tape is losing stick, just get some new tape. Don't keep trying to use it if it's not staying down. So for this section, I'm using Barn Door and Spiced Marmalade. So I don't have like a lighter version of a red or a different version of the orange, but they blend so well together. So I thought, well, they don't have to be the same colour family, just as long as they blend nicely together. So this Spiced Marmalade is one of the newer ones that I've purchased, and I do really love it. It goes really nicely with the red. Obviously, it goes really nicely with that fossilized amber as well. So you can see exactly what I am doing here to create this background. So I'm going to jump forward to the very last section to complete. So the other colour combinations that I have used, next I had Tumbled Glass with Salty Ocean, which is the blue section. I then did Wilted Violet and Seedless Preserve for that really beautiful purple blend. And then in this last section, I'm going back to Spiced Marmalade and Fossilized Amber because I did have one section left. So I just sort of paired these two together because again I thought they'd work really beautifully together. So really quickly, this background, it really didn't take me very long to do this at all, so you can make this as complicated or as basic as you want. Like I said before, if you've only got a handful of colours, then you can just do the blocks in those colours rather than blending particular colours together. So let's take a look at our finished background, all complete, and I really love it. I think it's perfect. I think it's really kind of 80s, quite retro. I love the colour combinations, the different, that sort of geographic sort of pattern that we've created, and I think those blends do work really beautifully together. So now we've got our background all finished, we can go ahead and get started with our stamping. So the stamp set that I'm going to be using is this Card Making Magic by Christina Griffiths. So these are really beautiful stamps. This was a freebie with issue 190 with Simply Cards and Papercraft. If you can't get hold of this anymore, apologies. It's just something that I've got in my stash, obviously, and I want to keep using those products. So the first thing I want to do before thinking about stamping is using my anti-static powder tool and rubbing this really generously over this background. Because I'm going to be white heat embossing our stamped image onto this background, I don't want to have any embossing powder stick to the rest of my background. So if you would just tip some embossing powder onto this background now, it would literally just stick to this background. By using the anti-static powder tool, it prevents that from happening. So I'm going to make sure I dusted my background enough by just dipping some embossing powder onto it, and I'm just going to see if the powder sticks to any sections. If it does, I can go back in and reuse my anti-static powder tool, and then that will get rid of it. But I'm happy with that, so we can now move on to stamping. Because I'm going to be heat embossing this, and I'm going to be using my clear emboss ink, which is a sticky ink, I'm going to use my stamping platform because I can't see where I'm stamping, so I want to make sure that I get a really good impression and I can stamp multiple times. So I've just lined up my background into my stamping platform. I've picked up my stamp, and like I said, I'm just using this embossing powder ink, which is a sticky ink, and it's clear, onto our background. Like I said, I stamped this multiple times. Now that I'm happy with it, I can go ahead and put my white embossing powder onto it. If you do get any sort of little stray bits of embossing powder, I literally just go in with a dry paintbrush and just flick them off. I feel like that is the best way of doing it. When I'm happy with my embossing powder, I'm going to go in with my heat tool, and I'm just going to heat set this image. So you can see how then creating a background like this and then just white heat embossing over the top of it, it's not taken away from the background that we've created, and it's just going to create a really beautiful card. So I've just been repeating this process over and over again, and you can see that I've now covered the whole of this panel. So I'm just heat setting the last stamped image, but you can see that it's really not taking anything away from that beautiful block coloured background. I think this is such a fab card design. I really love pairing those kind of harsh square angled lines then with those curved images of the stamp. I think it works really, really well. Before we go ahead and pop a sentiment on our card, let's take a look at this panel. So you may notice that one of these stamped images hasn't been heat set. So for whatever reason, I just missed this, but I do go back in, reapply that embossing powder and then heat set it. So let's now add a sentiment to our card. So I didn't want to just add a regular stamped sentiment, I wanted something a little bit different. So I had a look around at what I had and I found these laser cut letters. And I thought this would work perfectly just to add some dimension, just to be a little bit different. So we're going to spell out happy birthday. So like I said, these are sort of wooden laser cut letters, and I was going to colour them in just to help them stand out, but they didn't really colour in too well. So what I'm going to do is create a black strip to go behind these letters, and it's just going to make them sort of stand out a little bit more. So the letters are 2 centimetres high, but I've actually cut this strip to be 1.5 centimetres because I wanted them to hang over just a little bit, because I don't want that black strip to cover up too much of that really beautiful background that we've created. So I've adhered down my black strip and I've laid out sort of roughly where I want my letters to be positioned. So what I can do now is using my T-square ruler, so I know that my sentiment is straight, is I can start putting down these wooden letters. So there is a like a release paper on the back of this. All you do is peel that off and it is sticky, and these are actually really sticky. So I picked just this so that you can get a big bag of them for not a lot of money, and I think I picked these ones up from the range. So I've just worked my way down these sentiments and just stuck all of these down, and I think they look perfect. I think it just adds something a little bit different to our card. So again, super easy letters to use. And these are perfect as well if you want to customize your cards, if you want to put names on it. I would recommend these letters are perfect. So I really love how that looks. So now we can get our card assembled and get it finished up. For the card base, I've gone with a black cardstock and I've cut this to 8.5 by 7 inch. I've scored at 3.5, and that's going to give me the perfect card base for this slimline card. I decided to go with a black card base because I thought it looked nicer with that strip, and I thought then it made all the colours and that white embossing just stand out really nicely. So I'm going to use this tape adhesive and I'm just going to tape our panel down onto our card base. The other thing that I have done as well is just added a few gems, so just some clear gems to our card as well, just to give it a little bit of pop and a little bit of sparkle just in those gaps of colour in between our stamped images. So for my first slimline card, I absolutely love this card. I think I love the colours, I love the way it's come out, I love that white embossing powder on top of it as well. I think it's perfect. So to finish this card off, what I'm actually going to do is create an envelope to go with it. And I'll be using the We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board because they do have dimensions on there to be able to create an envelope for this sized card. So you can see I've just created this envelope for some white cardstock. So you will notice, apologies there for the camera going out of focus, but you will notice that the top and the bottom flaps are straight. So with the dimensions that you use, they end up being too big. You're not able to actually create the envelopes. You have to cut them down. But I can't see that there's any instructions on sort of doing that, so I've just kind of made it up myself. The only thing that is a bit disappointing is obviously then I can't get those edges in the corner rounder, so the card just ends up sort of looking like this. So you can see here our finished envelope all assembled, and now what I'm going to do is just a little bit of ink blending on this envelope just to match it in with our card. So you can see on the flap on the back of the envelope that I've just masked off in the exact same way again. And for the first section again, I've picked that spun sugar and the picked raspberry. In the middle, I've used that squeezed lemonade and that fossilized amber. And now again, using cracked pistachio and peacock feathers. One thing that you might notice here is we've got that really thin white line between the pink and the yellow section. So again, that was when I was masking that section off. I went too far over the pink line. So personally, I didn't want it like that, but that's just how it ended up. So I tried to create that same thing again between that yellow section and this blue-green section that I'm doing here now, just to kind of even it up a little bit. But that's why, for me, I like to just overlap the colours ever so slightly so you don't get that white line. Now all we need to do is take off our low tack purple tape. This is always my favourite part because it reveals sort of what's underneath. But this bit on the envelope is really reminding me of like a kite or like a parachute or something like that. I just think it looks really cool. So the last thing I'm going to do to this envelope, then we're all finished, is I'm going to use the Distress Micro Glaze. And previously I was using my finger, but now I've picked out one of these daubers, so it looked dirty, but this is perfectly clean. There is no sort of ink on this sponge at all, and I'm going to be using this to apply the product. So I would say after having used this, it's far easier doing it this way than using your finger. This is now going to be a dedicated sponge for this micro glaze. I'm not going to be using it for anything else, and especially for using a bigger section like I'm doing here, it's just far easier than using my finger. So once I've done this, all you do is go ahead and take a dry paper towel, a clean paper towel, and just sort of buffer off any excess glaze. If you do use your Distress Oxides like I have here, I would 100% recommend that Distress Micro Glaze, and I will pop a link to it in the description box down below. So here is our finished card and our envelope, and I love, now that I'm able to make my own envelopes, I do love the idea of matching the envelope with the card. So again, this is a plain white envelope, which a lot of us have, but just by doing something like that, just on the flap, it just sort of makes it sort of fit in a lot nicer with the card itself. But hopefully this video has just given you a little bit more inspiration to have a go at it yourself and think about using some of the products that you've got at home. So if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so. It does really help support my channel and helps it grow. If you are interested in any of the products that I've used, if I can link to it, I will in the description down below. So thanks very much for watching and happy crafting.